Hi, you guys. So today is our last lesson of the entire school year. We're doing 10.4, our last matrices lesson. You are going to need your calculator, so if you don't have that, go get that out or open it up on your Chromebook with the Google Chrome extension. Today we're looking at how to find the inverse of a matrix. And similar to multiplication, we usually would have done this by hand as well. We just don't have time this semester, so we're only showing you guys how to do it on the calculator. A couple things first to find the inverse of the matrix. So inverse is kind of like reciprocal. This is a similar process. So if I have a number like 8, the reciprocal of that would be 1 over 8, because this can be 8 over 1. It's kind of like that idea, but it's a little bit more complicated when it comes to a matrix rather than just a regular number. So if we were going to do it by hand, this down here is the formula that we would use. So it has a to the negative first power. Now that is our notation, meaning that's how we write the inverse of a matrix. So this is matrix A. The inverse has that little -1 exponent. If you're trying to read that out loud, we actually say A inverse. We don't say a to the negative first or anything like that. So this would be A inverse equals, and then we have this big formula. Now we're not going to do it by hand, so I'm not going to get too much into that. The one thing I will point out, kind of a side note, this little calculation down here, it's called the determinant. Now, again, if we were doing it by hand, we would talk a lot more about that, and if we had time to do a few other applications, we would talk about what that number means. It's basically a special number for inverses that we use to do a couple other calculations, or sorry, for matrices that we use to do a couple other calculations. And you find it by doing some multiplication of the diagonals, so A times D minus B times C. It's just like a regular number. Not a big deal, just something to point out there. What is really important for us is this first bullet point. So this is a big idea. An inverse can only be found if you have a square matrix. That's talking about the dimensions. You have to have the same number of rows and columns. So, for example, if it's a 2 by 2, if it's a 3 by 3, if it's a 4 by 4, anything like that where you have the same rows and columns, then you can find an inverse. If it is not a square matrix, you cannot find the inverse. It is not possible. Okay? And you would get an error on your calculator if you tried to do that. So we're just going to get right into it. Just like the multiplying, we have the steps written out here as a good reference, but we'll just walk through it on the calculator and then you'll try a couple on your own. So 2 examples together, and then you'll have 2 to do on your own. Example 1, part A, it says, given the matrix A is this, we're going to find A inverse. So if I'm going to do this on my calculator, the first thing I need to do is type in the matrix. So to get to the matrix screen, I click second, and then the inverse button, we will use that later, but see the blue word matrix, that's what I want. So second, then this button here. Now I need to edit because I want to type in my matrix, so scroll over to edit, click enter. I need the dimensions here. So this guy is a 2 by 2. So because it has the same rows and columns, it's a square matrix, so I can find the inverse. So I'm going to change this to 2 by 2. And then type in my entries, 5, enter, 6, enter, 2, enter, and -2, enter. And you don't have to clear out old entries, you can just type over them. So that's done. So now, kind of like when we multiplied, I have to quit this completely. I want to get all the way back to my regular home screen. So if I click second and then the mode button, it will quit. So I need to be at the regular home screen. Now I actually have to go back into the matrix screen. So click second, matrix, because this time I want to select the matrix I just typed in, and that was matrix A. So I want matrix A. So now it's giving you matrix A here, but I want to calculate the inverse. So I'm going to click the inverse button. See here it has x to the negative first. That's the inverse button. I'm not clicking second just the inverse button as it is, and you should see the little -1 pop up. So now it's going to do the inverse of that matrix. Click enter. Now I get a whole bunch of ugly numbers. I do not like that. We don't like decimals. So just like always, if I want to change decimals to a fraction, I click math and then enter, enter. And now it gives me my matrix with nice fractions. Most of the time you will get ugly numbers like that and you'll want to switch it to fractions. So actually I'm going to write A inverse equals, and then I'll write my matrix, 1/11, 3/11, 1/11, and -5/22. And I'm done. So remember, to get the fractions, we clicked math, enter, enter. So if you want to add that to your notes as well, that might be helpful. Okay, we'll do one more together and then you'll have 2 to do on your own. So I'm going to enter my matrix. This is a 2 by 2, so again I can find the inverse. Okay, if it was a 2 by 3, for example, I could not. No inverse for that one. So go to second, matrix. I'm going to go over to edit. I'm just going to edit matrix A again because we're done with that other one. So click enter. It's already a 2 by 2. That's good. So I keep clicking enter until I get onto the entries. 8, -11, 4, and 3. Okay, I want to find the inverse, so I have to quit this completely. Right, if I'm going to do an operation with matrices, I have to be on my home screen, so I'm going to clear this so it's not as cluttered. Now I'll go back into the matrix screen. Under names, I'm going to select that first one because that's what we edited, and I want the inverse. So I just click the regular inverse button, and then enter. Don't like those numbers. Click math, enter, enter. Okay, so I copied it down onto my sheet. I was having some computer issues, but that's basically it. So once you have your matrix here, then you write it down and you're done. Make sure you're using proper notation for the matrix when you write it down, B inverse. Okay, so you have 2 to try on your own down here, matrix A and matrix B, and you're going to find the inverse of each of them. All right, here are my final answers. Inverse of A is down here. Inverse of B over here. You can pause to look a little bit closer. Again, there's not really much work to show here for either of these because it's on the calculator. So if you're having trouble or not getting the same answers, first double check that you typed the inverse in correctly, and then make sure you're following the right order of the steps and going back to the home screen, the regular home screen, before you do the inverse calculation.